I love using sealing wax, and I am going to go on a deep dive today all about this special stuff. When I was about 10 years old, my family was gathered around the TV watching a movie, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And there was a moment in the movie where my jaw just dropped. And I turned to my parents and I was like, "What is that?" Maid Marian was sealing a letter with sealing wax. She was holding it over a flame. And I don't know what came over me, but I was just completely taken by this stuff. And my parents explained to me while the movie continued, "Oh yeah, we used to use that in Ceylon to seal packages and letters." And I could not get that out of my head. So I hounded my parents to get me sealing wax. This was like in the 90s, and they didn't know where to find sealing wax. So they actually wrote to my grandmother when she was in Sri Lanka, and she brought me back sealing wax. Sealing wax goes back to ancient Rome when they didn't have paper for documents or contracts. Everything was on clay tablets, and the way that a signature would be applied, or a form of authentication was by marking it with wax and then stamping the wax with a seal. In the Middle Ages, documents were signed with seals as well. And then later, when in the 1800s, letters were sent before envelopes were invented, paper was folded and closed with sealing wax. When envelopes were eventually invented, at first they weren't gummed, there wasn't glue on them. So even for the closure of envelopes, sealing wax was used. Today, there's been a resurgence in sealing wax. People have discovered how wonderful this is, and I have been using this since I was a little kid, since I was 10, since I discovered it. But it's really nice to see how often it's used now. But there are different kinds of sealing wax, and I would like to share with you what those differences are. So, where should we start? Let's start on what I consider the very bottom. this stuff. So this stuff, these are glue sticks. And these are colored. You can get them in all colors, but the color that emulates sealing wax are the red sticks. And this stuff goes into a glue gun, heats up, and then is actually applied as you would apply hot glue. So, I've never used this, but I'm guessing that it needs to cool down a little bit before I stamp it. Okay, let's try this. Ugh. It's just awful. I hate this stuff. Okay, this is really part of my point. I've never used this, but I know a lot of people use this. And one of the reasons why people use this is because it's fast. You put it in the glue gun, and if you're doing wedding invitations, for example, you can do like 30 of them at the same time or simultaneously. You don't really have to wait a long time. The other thing about this type of seal in a glue gun is that it's flexible. And if you want to put a seal on a letter that goes through the mail, it needs to be flexible, otherwise it will crack and break off. So let's see if now this comes off. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that worked. So that's how that looks. This is my very first time ever using this stuff. I'm not going to use the word that I want to use because it's a bad word. But this is flexible. First type of sealing wax that's available today, the glue gun sealing wax. The second type of sealing wax is also a flexible sealing wax, but it is a wax that comes with a wick on it. And this kind of feels like beeswax. It feels like a mixture between beeswax and a crayon. It doesn't have a smell really, but as I said, it has a wick, and the way this is used, which I feel is a little nicer than the glue gun because you have to light a candle. Automatically that makes it more special when you have to light a candle. You light the wick heats up the wax, and then the wax is going to drip. And this is called wicked sealing wax or sealing wax with a wick. And as you can see, this takes longer to use than the glue gun wax. Like this wicked wax comes as a set of all these colors. Do you want my opinion? Hideous. Hideous. This also, the wick is extinguishing. I think it knows that I hate it. But I'm doing this because I want to show you. I want to show you what's out there, and I want to show you the difference. Okay? So there is the wicked wax. Put that aside. And my seal. I always breathe on it to put some steam on it right before it goes into the wax to kind of act as a release agent. There. That was much better. That worked much better than this stuff. And this is also flexible. So this type of sort of beeswaxy wicked wax can also go through the mail. You can see here, once it's dry, look, it's really flexible. If this was on an envelope, it would still move, and it's not going to crack. Okay? The third and final type of wax that I am going to demonstrate is the type of wax that I use. And the wax that I'm using is real sealing wax. It's this right here. It has a smell. It has a very distinct smell. I can't even say what it smells like because I always associate this smell with sealing wax. There's nothing else like it. Like since I was 10, I've been smelling this stuff when my grandmother brought it back from Ceylon. It's usually red. It does sometimes come in gold and black. And I guess there are certain manufacturers that make it in other colors because it essentially, what this is a resin or a lac from a tree mixed with other things like grease or chalk and then a pigment. And it comes in sticks. This is also known as bank wax or bank sealing wax or Bank of England sealing wax. And it comes in these long sticks. I mean, look at this box. This stuff is not cheap. Each stick is maybe $6 to $9. A box like this was like $80 or $100. But it comes in these beautiful square long sticks. And it's fragile. Like if these fall, they'll break. I just think this is so beautiful. Like this whole thing is so beautiful. And this wax is actually meant to be fragile, so you can't put it through the mail. And I'm going to explain why. First, let me demonstrate. So the wax gets heated up over a flame, and it should be heated up gently. Like you don't want to stick it in the flame like this, but if you hold it over the flame, slightly over the flame, it will heat gently and evenly. Historically, it was distasteful to have big, chunky wax seals on documents. It was more elegant to have thin, shiny, the wax should be shiny seals. And this was also a thing that not everybody did. It was associated with aristocracy or the monarchy or the clergy using sealing wax, like in the old days, in medieval times. Okay, so that was warmed nicely. That gets put onto there, and then I'm going to use my stamp I found in Munich years ago. I mean, look at how different of an experience that was. It's just better. This is the real deal. This stuff, this is the historic stuff. This is what has been used for centuries for seals. In the 1800s, colors were associated with different things. Men generally used red wax, women would use rose-colored wax. If you were sending correspondence during mourning, the wax would be black. So there was a significance to the color. But I like to use the traditional dark red wax. And the reason why this is made to be fragile is because historically, if someone was fooling around with a seal too much, it would break. It should be very delicate, especially when it was used for closing letters. If someone could tamper with this and open it up, they could read the letter and potentially try to stick it back together. But when it's very delicate like this, as soon as you start tampering with it, it'll break. And when you did receive the letter from whoever was sending it, you actually usually had to break the seal to open the letter. So it was a form of security. And that to me is part of its charm. I actually don't use wax on letters that I put through the mail because I think this stuff is horrible. It's just not nice. Like this experience for me, and this is why this really is a deep dive into sealing wax. This experience to me is part of what makes sealing wax special. And over the years, as I've grown older and as I've been able to really curate my own space, leaving my childhood home, for example, where I was at the mercy of everyone else that lived in there, I've realized that using these things are just as much about your surroundings as they are about the actual thing. And this hideous thing is an affront to the experience of using this. I would just rather not do it, genuinely. And that's why if someone was to say, but don't you want to put a seal on a letter? Yes, only if I could use this. Only if I didn't have to use this. So what that means is that if I'm writing a note to somebody that I'm going to hand to them, or that I may be giving to a friend to give to someone else, I will put sealing wax on it. But more often, the reason I use sealing wax is for gifts, where it's not going through the mail. I am handing it off to the person. And I have been overwhelmed by starting a P.O. box and receiving letters from all over the world. And the thing that is so touching to me is when I see that someone has used wax like this on a letter that they sent me. Because when it gets to me, the seal is long gone. It's not on there. But what remains is a little sort of a stain on the envelope. And that makes me smile because they tried and they thought maybe it will get to him intact. Let me show you what happens when this is bent. So here we have the glue stick, right? And this, look, I can bend this and it's fine. Here we have the wicked wax. I can also bend this. I can bend this aggressively. Nothing happens. And here we have the real sealing wax. Watch. If I had to open the letter, I have to break the seal. Now watch what happens when I try to open the letter with this. Now watch this. What was What was the most special part of this? To me,
it was how that seal broke.
Such a really small, tiny detail. But if I was inspiring you to use sealing wax, I would want you to think about that small detail, because this is also a small detail. This is a small detail on a letter or a gift. But the reason I love using these things is really about the experience. And that experience is tied to something. It's tied to something historic. It's tied to the original use and reason why this was used. It was used to be broken, breaking the seal. It had to be broken. It was the gate. It was the barrier. And this, to me, is just wrong. It's wrong for so many reasons, and I don't want it in my life. I don't want to take the good parts of it just to make it work. Because at the end of the day, this is plastic. That's what this is. And even looking at this, like even looking at what happened with the paper, look at this here, and look at the paper surrounding it. Look at this, and look at this. Opening the paper around a seal like this is like a violent opening. It's rough. These are the small things that I feel impact me on a very deep level, but they add up. And if we can be conscious of these small things and bring them into our life in a way that benefit us, that is when I think they have the biggest impact. Sealing wax, a deep dive, horrible, terrible, not so bad, the best, good. There you have it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.